Matthew Heineman is the director of The First Wave, a documentary following nurses, doctors, and administrators as they respond during the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Denton Davidson for Gold Derby. Matthew, this is an emotional, gut-wrenching look at the impact the first wave of COVID had on healthcare workers and patients in New York. And my first immediate reaction when I was watching it was, how did you get in there so fast? And how did you convince hospitals to let you in there and kind of see what was going on?
Yeah, I woke up in early March like everyone did and was just terrified by this, potential tsunami that was about to sweep across our country, and just felt this enormous obligation to try to document this moment. We were so inundated with stats and headlines. And again, as we talked about before, I wanted to sort of put a human face to it. We were, clapping at 7 p.m. for our healthcare workers. We were talking about it as if it was a war zone, doctors and nurses on the front lines. We weren't seeing those images. And so I wanted to try to, not tell the story from the outside, but put people right in the middle of it and humanize the experience of doctors, nurses, and patients in this, life-altering pandemic.
And what was the relationship you were able to form with some of the subjects you followed like? Because they really open up and get pretty vulnerable and emotional throughout the process of some of your interviews and what they're going through. How do you develop that relationship and gain that trust with the people that you're speaking to?
I rarely did do interviews. It's an experiential film, and I wanted, in which trust is, the most important part of making a film like that, making a verite film. And when we started shooting this, we had no idea where this was all going to go. We were so naive in thinking that, this was going to last 2 or 3 weeks. And we were shooting sort of 16, 18 hours a day. Obviously that didn't, it continued. We ended up filming for 4 months and we're still living with it today. But it was, it was by far the hardest film I've ever made. It was an absolutely terrifying experience. And just everything you take for granted in making a documentary, going to the bathroom, eating food, putting the camera down, these were all potential ways to get the virus or spread the virus. And so it was really, really complicated, emotionally, logistically, physically.
And because it was all happening in real time, like you said, it's not like you had like a vision or a storyboard really to follow. You're going into this blindly, as you said, thinking, oh, this will be done in a few weeks. So when it's not, and it's still ongoing, how do you take your film and say, okay, we have to stop. Like we have to make a film about something here, and we're going to cut it here and let it speak for itself.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on some level it is a COVID film, but I hope that the film is about so much more. And it's about the power of the human spirit. It's about how human beings come together in the face of crisis. It's about racial injustice. It's about many things that we experienced over those 4 months. It wasn't really until the edit room, because I often start editing my films as I'm shooting them, that we came up with the title, The First Wave. And it's sort of the first time in my career where a title actually had like editorial import, where every time we tried to, include a scene from after the first wave, because we kept shooting through the summer and the fall, it just didn't fit. And so in the edit room, came up with that title, The First Wave, and those are sort of our goalposts from March to April of 2020. But I can't say, while we're shooting, I knew exactly how this was going to end, because there's a lot of great stuff that happened afterwards. But it's sort of, having that discipline in the edit room to have that endpoint, and then it just so happened that all of our subjects and participants in the film had very natural story arcs over that time.
And what's the size of the crew then you're able to work with on a film like this? Because you're getting into such personal space, especially in a hospital, and it's also dangerous for you, because you guys didn't really know what sort of danger you were putting yourself into at the time. So what's that filming process like, and is it different than documentaries you've made before, or not much?
I mean, in some ways, the film's a period piece. Obviously now we have vaccines,
Yeah.
we have PPE, we have other things that we didn't have at the time, or at least we're in short supply at the time. We knew so little about how the virus was disseminated, and so yeah, I mean, we basically just were developing safety protocols as we went in the hospital. It was a really, really terrifying experience. My dad battled cancer through most of my life, and so there's no scarier place for me to go than in a hospital. I just had this allergic reaction just the first minute I stepped in. But I think we all felt this obligation to make this film, and also despite the horror of it all, despite the fear, despite the terror, I think there was so much love and humanity and courage and fortitude that we witnessed every single day. I think that was the overwhelming feeling that we had. And while it was a difficult experience, there was also so much hope. And the film is really a testament to the power of the human spirit, and that's what we witnessed. And I hope that comes across in the film.
And it is sort of a time capsule as well. And while all of this was happening, the George Floyd murder happened, and the Black Lives Matter movement and protests were out in the streets. So you incorporate that really well into the film. How important did you feel that was to make sure that part of the story was told as well?
It was really important. I mean, I think when we finally got the access, and it was really hard to get the access, it took us a couple of weeks, and a lot of rejections to find the hospital that we ended up filming at. But you didn't need to be a doctor or epidemiologist to realize that this disease disproportionately impacted people of color. You just had to walk through the ICU and witness it. And so that all came out naturally through following Dr. Duget, our main doctor that we followed over the course of these 4 months, who's a first generation American from Haiti, who spoke quite vividly about that. And then when George Floyd was killed, in these streets surrounding me that were previously empty were suddenly filled with protests and people. Again, we just followed where the story took us, and she went out in the streets and started protesting, and we followed her there, and it just became part of this story. And that's why it's just so important in making verite films to have the trust of your subjects, and that trust is not something I ever take for granted. It's something that you have. It's like a romantic relationship or professional relationship or a friendship. It's something you need to renew every single day, every single week, because when those really intimate moments happen, or when those really difficult moments happen, your subjects let you continue filming during those times, and that was certainly the case day in, day out with this film, especially as we were sort of back in the hospital. We're filming on the sort of razor thin line between life and death at all times.
And when you're in a situation where you're pulling so much footage, but you have to make those edits, were there any scenes that hurt significantly more than others to lose, just because they didn't fit into the film or the story you were trying to get across? How is that, losing parts of things that you've spent so much work doing?
I think in I'm 38 years old. I think in my younger days, I was more sensitive about losing scenes that meant a lot to me. I probably become a bit more ruthless in the edit room as I've gotten older. And I had an amazing team of filmmakers and collaborators that worked on this film. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of great stuff that's on the cutting room floor, but I think we knew that this was very difficult subject matter, and that the pacing of the film was really important, because I wanted people to watch. I wanted people engaged with it, even if it was difficult. And so that was really, really important.
And as a documentary filmmaker, what was your biggest lesson or takeaway from this project, if you could think of one?
Many things. I mean, I think going back to a question you asked before that I don't think I answered is, having filmed in conflict zones all around the country, excuse me, in conflict zones all around the world, this was definitely the hardest film I ever made. When you come home from a conflict zone, you can sort of turn your brain off. Whereas with the first wave, we were living the same thing we were documenting. It was a sort of 24/7 experience, every single day, every single week for months. And so, you just could never shut off. But I think through that process, we learned so much. And on one level, the film's an homage to the bravery and courage of healthcare workers. On one level, it's a document of this moment in time, and it just felt so much pressure while making this film, knowing the access that we had and knowing that a lot of people didn't have this access. And this issue's become so politicized, and that's really, really sad to me. So I think we just wanted to highlight and focus on the human beings at the center of it. And I think there's not one person on this earth that hasn't been touched by COVID. And so I think, and I hope that the film provides a vehicle through which we can reflect on all that we've been through. And what have we learned? What have we learned as a society? What have we learned as individuals? And how can we apply that to the present? And how can we apply that to the future?
Well, Matthew, congratulations once again on this documentary. The First Wave is currently available to stream on Hulu. So good luck throughout this award season. And thank you for speaking with Gold Derby today about your work on The First Wave.
Thanks so much for having me.